Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 8. Today's episode is a special edition fully dedicated to what many are calling the largest IT outage in history. You guessed it, the CrowdStrike incident. With me today, I have a panel of esteemed tech wizards who will help us deconstruct what happened. I'd like to welcome Chris Harrison, Byron de Jesus, and Keith Richard to the show. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we dive in, could each of you please take a few seconds to introduce yourselves to our listeners? Chris, I'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Chris Harrison. I am a account executive working for a nationwide managed IT services and cybersecurity services provider. I'm based here in Southern California. This is a wonderful opportunity to speak with like-minded individuals. Very excited to have some open dialogue regarding this outage. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Byron, do you want to go next?
Hello, this is Byron de Jesus. I am with Zone 1 Internet Exchange out of Minneapolis. We are an IT consulting firm and a managed service provider. So working on all aspects with small, medium-sized businesses across the country, actually.
Thank you. And Keith?
Thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Keith Richard, and I've been the director of IT at greatergood.com for the past 10 years. We're based in Seattle, but I'm located in Minneapolis. Looking forward to talking more about this.
All right. Well, great. Let's dive in. So, in case, those of you listening don't know what happened, on July 19th of 2024, so this year, there was a mass outage of Windows systems failing, and this, infamous blue screen of death was appearing on people's screens. And this outage was related to CrowdStrike. And we'll get into who CrowdStrike is and what their product is and how it's being used. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context of exactly the impact. So 8.5 million Windows devices were directly affected. Now, what's ironic about this is that that's actually less than 1% of Microsoft's global Windows install base. So even though that number is big, the impact was, fairly small if you think about it. But then when you think about the dollars for the financial loss of this, nearly an estimate of 5.4 billion for the top 500 US companies. And I think the airline industry was probably most challenged because they had approximately 5,078 flights that had to be rescheduled. So, I just wanted to give a little bit of context of the impact, and I'm sure I'm missing some, numbers in there. But let's kind of kick off our conversation about who is CrowdStrike. And Keith, I'm going to turn that over to you and see if you could help us. And gentlemen, please, jump in at any point.
Sure. CrowdStrike is an antivirus tool. The name of it is called Falcon. So occasionally there's a class action suit and that refers to CrowdStrike Falcon. But it does on-device protection of viruses and malware. It is a tool that is updated regularly with definition files from CrowdStrike itself. And it was one of these definition files that had some bad information in it that caused the blue screen of death result on the Windows machines of Windows computers and servers at a lot of we'll say more higher end or premium companies because it's a premium product. So it definitely affected your Fortune 500 brands a lot more than small, medium businesses.
Yeah, so it's basically endpoint security.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to weigh in on CrowdStrike and the tool or this Falcon product?
Yeah, I can chime in. And by and large, and Keith is really spot on, but by and large as well, CrowdStrike started in the endpoint protection from a security standpoint, and then products got a little bit more granular for clients who have their own internal security or infosec team who require a little bit more granularity. So they have additional products which provide managed SOC, SIEM, security incident and event monitoring. So CrowdStrike encompasses a broad variety of cybersecurity services, and it's sold directly through direct sales to clients, and then also through the channel through MSPs and MSSPs.
Gotcha. So that's interesting that you mentioned that they have a variety of products, right? So it was really the premium product that Keith mentioned that is really the one that was impacted, not some of their maybe lower tier products.
Yeah, I most likely, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, is probably more on the endpoint side, which is Falcon their endpoint?
Yeah, so
it is.
Falcon's their endpoint, and then they have what they call their XDR and MDR levels of the tools, which are that bring in that SIEM data that you talked about, and from other places in their technology stack, like Microsoft Office and other inner office tools like that.
So let's talk about exactly what happened on that day. And maybe we can kind of go through the series of events, because when I looked at this timeline, the fix was in fairly quickly, but because of the impact that it had, it just sort of lingered a bit. And that was probably a really bad way of explaining it. So Byron, why don't you help us understand it a little bit better?
Sure. So Sonal, yes, the original update release that was flawed was at 4:09 UTCs on July 19th. So they released a signature update file and they rolled it out. Well, that one then, even though they had discovered and had fixed it by 5:27, so literally about an hour, little under an hour and a half later, the release had been already rolled out into systems. Well, a lot of people may not realize, but updates don't, even when they're released, they are not rolled out and immediately installed on systems. So systems kind of have their schedule that they go back, as well as CrowdStrike will notify systems in a timely manner and spread it out to be able to deliver those signatures to systems. So that's why not everyone got affected. But of course, the premier clients get updates quickly, request for updates often. So that's why they were hit right away. And as Chris and Keith kind of pointed out, this is a premium product, which, not the average smaller company would be using. And yet a lot of these regular, end users would be impacted by as a second tier effect from these servers going down. So time wise though, even though they had patched and changed and rolled back already by 5:30 UTC, the updates had been already staged and put in and released to many different systems. And so, of course, as they get their update, this flaw was actually at the kernel, or a very low level, trusted area of the system that the software is allowed to run. And that actually caused the whole server to have a blue screen of death. So
let me ask you a quick question about that. And you gentlemen, please feel free to jump in. When it's staged to be implemented, is there any stopping it? At that point, is it sort of, it's going?
It's really going. It's staged, and it's literally sitting on deck, or, to be put in place. So once they get an update, there really isn't a way to stop the update from completing other than literally stopping the execution of the security software and uninstalling it. So it's just going to happen. Now, knowing that, you pretty much have to trust that when you get an update, that it's valid. And CrowdStrike even admitted that there was a flaw in their validation process, which allowed this particular update to go through.
So does that mean that it wasn't properly tested, or?
They haven't given as much detail on that. They just admitted that their update verification process had failed and had missed to catch this. So whether it was fully validated or whether they didn't test for the appropriate criteria for something like this to happen, you don't really know.
Yeah.
Right. What they've said so far, Byron, is that they only ran these updates through their validation tool and not ran it live in any environments, and their validation tool did not see that this error would occur. So
interesting. That's super interesting, because basically they did run some type of validation, but not in an environment that may have had some of the same versions, or that so that it would pick up that error message.
Yeah, I think the assumption is something like any other kind of patch or update, right? It is probably the most normal maintenance from any form of patching or software, the millions of updates that occur. This was just business as usual. That's what makes this instance so fascinating, that this one particular patch, which obviously was flawed in some form or fashion, caused this massive outage, which still leads me to believe, I still really can't put my finger on it. Even our organization, who has clients that are leveraging CrowdStrike, it impacted our workforce. Right now, it didn't impact me personally, but our clients were unfortunately impacted. And there is a timeline that was shared by our executive leadership team internally for our IT team, and then our service desk team to help out our clients. This was next to the AWS outage. If you guys remember that a couple of years ago, this, I would say, was probably more impactful as how widespread and the kind of clients that it touched.
Wow.
So just really interesting when you peel the onion layers.
Absolutely. And kind of I'm sorry, Keith, were you going to?
I was what I think is interesting though is most antivirus or endpoint protection platforms use this type of daily update technology for their definition file. So this is something where even if you don't have CrowdStrike at your company or the companies you support, is something you should really consider how you implement the antivirus technologies you have, and have those conversations with executive leadership on whether the daily or up to the minute definition file patching is makes sense for your organization, or if it should be on more of a delayed schedule.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because you could be in one of these situations, right? And we're going to get into that, but I wanted to just point out one thing in this timeline that we're talking about, because the time to put a patch in or a fix in, I think it was about an hour and a half. I think it took them to remediate the issue, and then it was all of the things that happened after that I thought were interesting. And I believe that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency had to issue an alert. And does this normally happen? Can you guys talk about that a little? Do they normally get wind of things like this that are widespread, and then they have to put some sort of statement out?
CISA puts out daily emails about any piece of software or hardware that people may run in the United States, and they typically are alerting on vulnerabilities and the management around that. So they felt they needed to put out a statement saying that this wasn't a vulnerability; it just was a bad update.
Yeah, which is interesting, because so many around my circle were like saying, "Oh, this is a cybersecurity issue," and as cybersecurity experts, we really want to make sure that we make that distinction between the two things. That this was a flaw, a software flaw, not an incident. But there are also some theories out there that what if it was an incident? So, I'm not going to weigh in on either, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think they really wanted to impart that this was not an attack,
Yeah.
to stay off basically any rampant rumors, as well as to stop a panic, right? I mean, there's going to be a panic enough from the outage of services, but if people were to say, oh my gosh, there's an attack going on, there's going to be a lot more people that are worked up and spinning their wheels for really no extra reason, right? And
Yeah.
there's this particular incident had its ripple effects that, of course, went through now the different layers of people who are dependent on services, who were calling help desk lines, and just support staff were being inundated with calls. I mean, there's a lot of help desks that their support lines were plugged up, and their email queues and their ticket queues. I can't get to this. I can't get to that. I need it. It's absolutely imperative for me to do my job, and et cetera, right? So that, on top of an IT team having to take the burden on of saying, hey, if there's an attack, we need to do some extra monitoring or due diligence. It was just that much more to pile on the plate, right? So
Yeah.
I actually really applaud their effort in that one communication, because that literally kind of puts a bunch of people at ease, and it lets them just manage the rest of it, right, as best they can. But at least they don't have to worry about a new security incident per se.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was key because I read another article that talked about how when the Y2K stuff happened, people were fearing that something like this would happen one day. And, here we are. And, just if you think about the way the world is moving now, cyber attacks are happening. And, being able to distinguish between the two is so important to, Byron, your point about, calming the panic, right? So, and also letting people focus to get a fix in place or even just help. And so I completely agree with you that getting that communication out was key. Why don't we talk a little bit about the type of remediation efforts that took place? So we know that, we know what CrowdStrike did. But then, what were some other things that happened? I don't know if any of you have a story to share, but I was hearing where people had to take, servers offline and manually bring them up in safe mode to then, back out the file. And was that sort of the primary remediation that was happening, or were there other things going on too?
So they once they found the root cause, and they understood what possible remediation paths there were, that left the impacted companies a few different paths to recover. So if their servers that were impacted did not have per se any data that they needed to recover since the incident, they could literally restore from a backup and continue services. And in the virtual world, maybe they're restoring from a snapshot, something that's quick and easy to do. And I'm sure those companies, they could do that. But most people, I should say most people, most companies in their platforms, data has been ingested and processed, and that server can't necessarily be rolled back. Or if it is, there's a cost for loss of data.
Mhm.
So knowing that, they really need to recover the actual system. And there was a method for them to do that, which you had alluded to, and that was, they actually had to boot up into a special recovery mode, back out these changes manually, and then get the server back up and running. And for smaller companies, they have easy access to that. For larger companies, only certain individuals actually have true access to be able to get to that layer where they can do that. And hence, that's why I'm sure this when this happened, they woke up people around the world to get into those, log into those special spots and get to that special console where they're able to do this.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out that it's important for for not many people to have access to do those special things, if you will, on a computer. Because if everybody else had access to that, then you would be opening yourself up to a little bit more vulnerabilities. Anyone else, Chris or Keith? Did you guys have an opinion on remediation efforts?
For me on the service provider side, I think for us was we have a very large and sizable service desk, and as we're a Microsoft Gold partner, it was a concerted effort of all hands on deck, and somewhere in the realm of I was hearing service staff members, both in our NOC and our service desk alignment team, were working pretty much around the clock. Shared with you guys that some incidents were 36 hours of some of our service desk members proactively working to get our clients back online because of the different verticals that we support, from healthcare, retail. This was a very large outage, which, as Byron had alluded to, touched so many people who just wanted to do their jobs. And I think in a service industry, because that's where we're in a service industry, just happens to be the layer of technology is the foundation that we support, but people not having the ability to do their job, that ripple effect of panic, right? And then you can quantify airports, right? Then it gets into something really very challenging, where airports were impacted, flights canceled. This was, and then you layered in with a company who's responsible of providing security to 300 of the Fortune 500 companies. It was very scary. I remember waking up that morning, hearing about it, right? And it was like, and I'm not going to lie, the first thing I thought of was like, whoa, CrowdStrike, they got hit. But at the end of the day, as I didn't dive into the news or anything, but I was like, wow, they got hit. I just heard about it. Didn't know about the patch. I was like, wow, CrowdStrike got hit. But I wasn't surprised, because that's just how evolving the threat landscape is. Everyone is so susceptible. I remember years ago, the Pentagon, I don't know if you guys remember, the Pentagon got hit. So this was then when I realized it was a patch that wasn't updated. But I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it wasn't this jarring surprise to me, because we're so used to hearing now all these different kinds of things that are happening specifically around cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, because I'm sure a lot of people woke up that day and were like, oh no, this is going to be my weekend.
Yeah.
Because in IT, and those of us that are in IT, we understand some of this, technology and the jargon, if you will. But, I remember having conversations with people in other industries who were just like, it's a Microsoft problem and this and that. And like, I found myself trying to really explain. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Some of this isn't going to come to people, rightfully so. If you're not in the industry, you're not going to necessarily understand it. And so I had to abandon trying to really explain what was happening. And so, but yeah, the fear, with just among the IT industry, what about those that aren't, right? And so that's just something to think about. Let's talk about, one of the questions that I had was, why weren't Apple or Linux affected by this? Do they not use this CrowdStrike, or can someone talk about that?
Sure. So Mac OS requires security vendors like CrowdStrike use system extensions to interface with the Mac OS kernel. Mm-hmm. And this requirement to use system extensions prevents only known software to the organization or end user to have this type of all access privilege to look at the file structure and what's happening on the computer. But since this privilege is managed by Mac OS, they have safeguards in place to limit things that may lead to a system hang or crash like we saw on Microsoft Windows with CrowdStrike.
So do you think that this is probably going to push Microsoft to, create a similar structure in their OSs as well?
I think so. They have put out statements since the event that rules in the EU since the 2010s have prevented them from implementing tools like Apple has done with Mac OS, and they think they now have the type of environment to make those changes now to try to limit access to the kernel of the operating system, which should hopefully make it more stable for everyone.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So even with a justification to, of an incident like this to allow Microsoft to make it an overall architectural change to their platform, which should theoretically induce more stability and reliability. The reality is that you'll verify the software or the extension or the piece of software that's running, but you, at a certain point, you have to trust that what it's going to do is beneficial. And for you as in the operating system, to have to verify and monitor and manage every aspect of every extension coming in becomes overly burdensome. And hence, that's why you'll have people will feel that their antivirus or anti-malware software now makes their computer slow, because the much slower is because now everything it's doing has to be checked by the babysitter, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
to a certain degree, can we completely mitigate this? No, I don't think that's realistic. I think they can try to minimize it, but at some point you have to trust that you have a vendor that's releasing something to you that's well tested, and you just got to let it run and kind of assume that it's going to do its job and not do bad things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like a full-time job, right? That's another resource that you would have to have in place to literally monitor all of the supposedly tested updates that are coming into your environment and then retest before they get deployed. I mean, that's a full-time
Right.
job,
Yeah,
right?
that's a resource nightmare, right?
Exactly.
For the computer. So yeah.
Yeah.
And again, as Keith pointed out, the way the Mac OS handles it is different. The reason this hit the Windows users, the Windows servers, and not them, is because it happened to be how the CrowdStrike software runs in the particular operating system, and it crashed their systems because their software was performing a memory violation. It was trying to access memory outside of its bounds, and would cause this particular error, which would result in Windows known big blue screen of death. And because it runs differently, like I said, in Linux and the Mac OS, that's why they weren't really affected. So it's still a possibility to happen on those platforms. But yes, it's because they're different.
Interesting. And so Linux is somewhat similar in the case that they have sort of a protector before these updates go in, or because Linux wasn't affected either, right?
No, Linux wasn't affected because of, I believe, how it handles, how the software is written to handle what it's managing for resources, because it's a totally different operating system. And really, Mac OS and Linux they're cousins. The Mac
Yeah.
OS is really based off of, a Linux type platform. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know and realize that. Apple's just done a very good job of creating a front face on top of that, and creating utilities, applications, tools, extensions that just make it easier for Mac OS users.
Yeah. I wanted to get your guys' opinion because I think, most of us on this call have been on those late night, Friday night, support calls or, through the weekend support calls. And if your manager came to you and said, here's a $10 Uber Eat coupon for working the weekend, how would you feel about that? And the reason why I say that is because I believe, and I don't know if this is rumor or if it's true, this is what CrowdStrike was offering to all of the support staff that was out there trying to remediate this issue.
CrowdStrike did make that offer to the system administrators that use the CrowdStrike product. They also canceled the code shortly thereafter. So not only did they give them a $10 voucher, it was worthless.
I don't know. Yeah, the PR team who maybe their hearts are in the right place, but I heard that too, Keith, and was just a range of emotions went through me. It was somewhat insulting. If I am a sysadmin or working at a service desk or NOC or someone like Keith or Byron or whatever the case is, and you get this email from CrowdStrike offering you a $10, DoorDash gift card or whatever the case is after you've pretty much worked countless amount of hours. I would be very hesitant as far as, and I need to tread lightly, but just really understanding what a true partnership means and and I can understand the effect that it had internally on CrowdStrike employees, right? They probably were just as, frustrated as the rest of people that were impacted, but just the optics of it just wasn't a good idea.
Yeah. In fact, I think I probably would have thought it was like spam or something. If I got an email as I was going through this, or even afterwards, that said, "Here's your $10 Uber Eats voucher," I would have been like, "Don't click on it. Nobody click on it."
It was.
I thought the same thing. I thought, this is somebody leveraging the overworked minds of support staff and trying to get them to click on a piece on a malware link or something.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that CrowdStrike would ever release something like this and think that this is actually, an adequate compensation or response.
Yeah.
$10 is insignificant, right? And yet, even though apparently it was valid, at least it was a valid attempt, and then of course they turned it off. But the overall cost of it to CrowdStrike, may have been a significant amount of money, and yet, spread across all the people that are affected. Of course, that's why it really was really shows a lack of respect for whoever decided to do that. It really shows a lack of respect or understanding for really what happened, right?
I had a funny story. I'm working on an opportunity with a manufacturer here in Southern California. We're proposing our opportunity, and this individual's working directly with CrowdStrike. Very typical ACIO. I have a relationship with him, so I've known this guy for some time. But it's always me chasing him. It's always me reaching out to him. It's always me. Are you going to be able to get on this call? The discovery call, all the bells and whistles of a typical sales process, right? And I am on a call the day of. My phone rings, and it's the CIO reaching out to me, and I'm like, "Oh, I wonder what he's calling about," right? Fortunately, it was a call where I could put myself on. It was a company call. And I jumped up and ran outside. I said, hey, Robert, how are you? And he said, hey, Chris, did you hear it? So it was just so funny, the ripple effect that it went, how just it created, and I think all of us can say the people that are non-tech, the amount of conversations I had with people and some of the things of how their mind operated. Well, wouldn't you think this CrowdStrike would maybe test this patch first? It's really fascinating. I'm like, yeah, you would think that, wouldn't you? It's just sparked so many different levels of conversation. But I love the fact that the CIO buddy of mine, who I'm just chasing and chasing and chasing, and he reaches out to me. And in no way, shape, or form did I get on the phone. Yeah, so you're still wasn't anything like that, but he was. So do you know what happened?
Sales opportunity.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I didn't even. I just, I told him that, and this is by the time they had released saying that it was a faulty patch. And that was a faulty patch. And even he was questioning it. That was the funny thing. He was like, I don't know, Chris. I say, hey, this is what I mean. This is very factual. This has been released by CrowdStrike that it was a patch. Oh, huh. Okay. So I'm like, So just interesting the
Yeah.
dialogue
No,
that it's created. Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, it's caused us to have this episode. So there you go. I wanted to touch a little bit on how hackers are taking advantage of this, and I've heard some things about some faulty websites being, put up, and people entering information into them, and it's really not even a CrowdStrike site. Have you guys seen or heard anything about how hackers are taking advantage?
I have not. So if any, I'm really interested in hearing how is it a phishing attempt or does anyone have any intel on that?
I don't have anything to add there, but I just assume with any major event that people are going to
Sure.
try to phish you. I know even talking with my father over the phone when he bought a new computer to install an antivirus, he managed in 30 seconds to install malware. I was like, how is this possible?
A whole other episode, though, right?
Yeah,
About
yeah.
parents and technology. We might have to come back and do that.
Yeah, the bad actors are going to leverage any particular major incident that's already
Mhm.
stirring up fear of the unknown for end users. And as Keith points out, it's pretty much any time something comes up, they just need a reason, or they need that in the forefront of end users' minds, that it's something that they can say, "Hey, we know more than you. Let us help you." And yet, you know, as well educated and as smart as the average end user is, and how aware they are, as soon as they are in unknown territory, they're vulnerable, right? And
Yeah.
so their thinking is, well, hey, this person, even though it's self-proclaimed, says they have something that can help me out, and then the story rolls on, just like Keith's father, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's a common story, and it doesn't surprise me though that using phishing after the fact. So some people who aren't even running CrowdStrike would believe, oh, I need to put this fix in place so it doesn't happen to me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. In fact, PSA, if you have never used CrowdStrike and you get some type of email or something that says you need to install something, please don't act. Just delete. That's my PSA for today. I have another one a little bit later, though. Let's talk about, how can we prevent this from happening in the future? Is there a way to do that, technically or not?
Well, I think, when we had our call yesterday, I know Keith spoke of some interesting exercises specifically, but it's a risk reward, right? Maybe disabling certain updating features, right? But then you're leaving yourself vulnerable by not updating critical. It's very hard. It's really challenging because it's all definition based, right? So you do need these critical updates. They're so instrumental because the threat landscape is and basically the amount of threats that are just I don't even know if zillion is an actual word, but they're all placed in this ginormous database and is constantly updated. So from a definition standpoint, it's just updating the threat landscape for endpoints and infrastructure. And by not, enabling those critical updates, right, you could leave yourself vulnerable, right? But at the same time, it could lend itself to a situation like this outage. But, does that make sense, Keith?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think some of the things I've thought about around this are one, how do you try to prevent it? And you just talked about that a little bit. The second item is, if you're in an event like this, are you prepared for it? Do you have an incident response plan?
Yeah.
If every computer in your company happens to be down, how do you communicate with your staff? So coming up with those plans or providing staff with a sheet of paper they hang next to their desk so they know who to call when.
Yeah. It's so important and it's so overlooked too, right? I mean, I think the larger organizations are required to some degree, if you will, from an organizational perspective, to have an IR and a DR plan or business continuity plan in place. IR, incident response, DR being disaster recovery. But it's the smaller guys, I think, that sort of overlook some of these things because they think, well, it's never going to happen to me. I don't need it. And it becomes this more of a reactive versus proactive approach to ensuring that their environments and their business can continue in the event of an incident like this.
I think some organizations focus too much on the incident response or disaster recovery of maybe it's their website, e-commerce
Mhm.
platform, but they don't think that something they run on their computer may prevent them from doing their job. So it just
Absolutely.
keeping keeping your mind open to all the potential incidents or disasters that may occur.
Absolutely. And I think that that small the tip, which seems so basic, but it's so critical about even just having phone numbers accessible. Because today, I mean, I can't even remember a phone number. I have to literally, everything is just programmed. I'm just pushing buttons. And so, especially in a heated moment, being able to remember some of these things is hard. So if I could just pull out a trusty sheet that had all the numbers of the people that I needed to call would be extremely helpful.
So, Sonal, I think your question that you bring up, before it gets an answer, really addresses the fine line between trying to prevent and trying to protect. Because if you're trying to prevent a false or a flawed update from coming in place, you'll automatically have to, as Keith pointed out, do a delay. Now, the penalty for that delay is that now you're going to delay all updates. And theoretically, the reason for some companies call them micro updates, some of them call them critical, immediate more immediate updates, etc., that they're deploying more regularly or in instantaneous response to a threat that was just discovered.
Mhm.
So if you delay that, then you now have increased your risk of being hit by an attack or that malware that may be doing that. So walking that fine line of trying to say we're trying to stop or prevent a bad update, and yet as Chris brings up, you have all these possible new things that are coming in that you're now going to put on hold. So so the analogy would be to say, well, I'm not gonna let somebody come in the door until I've really fully vetted, or I've let other people vet that update. But on the other hand, somebody else can walk through the door that checked all the boxes that you thought before was okay, and now you're gonna find out, oh no, that last guy came in. If I would have used the new update to look at that, I would have stopped him from coming in the door. He's already inside. So,
Yeah.
you know, um, and that's really up to, I would say, the business owner to decide where that fine line is, right? Um,
Yeah.
and in general, again, if you're going to rely on your vendor to provide valid updates to you, which I honestly think you kind of have to, um, and so to address the overall protection problem, you really just need to make sure you have, as Keith pointed out, an incident response plan, a really good
Mhm.
recovery plan from when something like this does happen. Because trying to push off a critical update, I think, is you just negated the value, one of the best values of your protection platform, by saying, I know you told me this is really a brand new attack vector, but I'm not gonna install it yet because I want to make sure that it doesn't crash my server by letting other people install it first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that distinction between, prevention and protection and completely agree with you. In fact, we talk about these plans and, having them in place. And, smaller organizations may not need to have these, 100-page documents. In fact, a one pager that might just explain, what to do might be good enough for your organization as long as you have one. But then don't just create one and, put it on a shelf. Do the tabletop exercises. Make sure that the people understand their roles and responsibilities if they're involved in doing incident response. And so that, it's almost second nature to them if they ever actually have to be in that situation. So strongly encourage, our listeners that if you don't have one, make sure you put something in place, but then also that you test it and that everybody understands what their roles are.
One thing that I found so fascinating, specifically around cyber, is, and especially from an organizational level, even from large organizations to mid-market and SMB, it's cybersecurity is such a huge sphere of culture. And what I mean by that is you have to have and continue from an educational standpoint, whether it's implementing an incident response plan, or like you said, Sonal, from a disaster recovery standpoint, but even cyber awareness training is something for me that I feel so wholeheartedly should be instituted, mandatory in every organization. Mandatory. Yeah. Every
Absolutely.
organization. It is so important to educate someone in HR or payroll who we're in tech. We know what a phishing email looks like, but someone who's not educated in other departments and, we are such a fast paced, especially in our work environments. We're so just inundated with emails. We're like squirrels, so our attention spans are fixated in another direction. Clicking on an email could be so detrimental to an organization. But if you can just get a millisecond for that person to just stop and think and look and go, hey, something just doesn't look right about it. It's such a cultural thing, right? It's such the fundamental of, and how to enhance the awareness is through leadership, right? Is through, not just a VP of IT or a CI or a CISO. This needs to be from a CFO. This needs to be from folks that, in some way, shape, or form have the purse strings from a revenue standpoint to create the budgets for IT, but it has to be a top-down, fundamental educational approach to cybersecurity, because we can deploy as many tools on any endpoint, any environment. If someone is not educated to know what to click on and what not to click on, all that is, it just, so it's a very, I really try my best to evangelize the importance of cyber awareness training.
Yeah.
And in no way, shape, and there are great programs out there from the more interactive little fun games, right? Those work really well. And then even just like you said, Sam, even a little one pager, print it out and put it next to you, these are the things just to look out for,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that just, again, I'll stress the importance of being proactive versus reactive when it comes to, securing your environments. And, obviously this was not a security breach, right? This was a software flaw. And, I want to make sure that I put that out there, because we're not sitting here trying to say that this was a breach of any sort. It was a flaw. And, unfortunately, like Byron and the rest of you have mentioned, that, you've got to take some risks. Otherwise, it's pointless to have any of these protections in place.
And I think, you were saying being prepared. And that's why I was, it's all about preparation in these instances. Whether it's, now if you're impacted and you're hard down like this outage is, nothing much really. You can't really have a little sticky notepad to prepare yourself for something like this, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last item before we kind of wrap up here: lessons learned. what have we learned globally from this? I think my big takeaway from all of this and this whole incident is that this is going to sound silly, but it can happen, right? Is that I think, sometimes we get very comfortable. And what this taught me is that it can happen. And so to be prepared, Chris, like you mentioned. But I'm going to just go around the room here and ask you guys, Keith, what was one of your lessons learned from this?
For me, it's just preparation and educating the people I support what their role might be in an incident like this, because most employees may think, I'm not in IT, I don't have a role in this, but we all do.
Yeah. That's so key, right? That if you're not in IT, you still have a role in this. And yeah, excellent point. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, from a service provider side of things, it's really hard to say, to be honest with you, because you can never prepare for something like this. And I mean, an outage of this magnitude.
Right. Yeah.
In preparation. So for me, on the front line of clients reaching out to me, reaching out to my NOC and service desk, the only thing I can really stress is really trying to build patience with clients, right? And again, I'm on the client side, right? Mm-hmm. Keith is obviously in IT. Byron, the same thing. He's a service provider, but we could only stress the amount of patience that our clients had with us, as they knew that we were getting calls from business owners. Right? Mm-hmm. All they wanted was just for their staff members to work, right? And patience is the only real thing I can. And I'm specifically talking an outage.
Yeah.
Something like this is just a really stressful.
It's super stressful, right? And it's so hard to keep yourself from yelling at somebody or just anything, right? So yeah, no, I think that's a really great lessons learned. Byron, how about you?
Well, I actually have to disagree with Chris a little bit. I believe that you can prepare even for something like this. So contingency planning is probably the biggest thing that comes out of this. Mm-hmm. So whether that's affecting you as the service provider or the business owner, having that incident response plan or business continuity plan, but even for end users, what's their contingency plan? I can't remote in and get to stuff. What do I need to do? Well, they need to understand, as you said, they have a role in it. And their role, they should have that one sheeter that says, okay, I can't do this. Who do I contact first? Who do I contact second? So some basics. And then, but even with all of that, every business depends on certain aspects of their technology or tech stack to run in places that they can't control. Whether you rely on Salesforce, you rely on Amazon Web Services, or Azure services, etc., right? You've placed your eggs in somebody else's basket. But you still can build your contingency plan even with those dependencies. And it just may be that you do have a certain point that you hit that is a sit and wait, as Chris points out, right? Patience. But knowing that you had a plan that's solid and you've hit your stop, where you have to wait for somebody else to get their stuff done or fixed, you at least have, ease of mind, right? You've got less stress because you have your plan in place to continue and to address things, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really what it comes down to for the business to continue operations. The people who don't have any type of contingency plan, those are the ones where they're all stressed out and they're trying to determine, do we even have a business after this, right? After this comes up, what's going to happen? Who do we talk to? Is our data valid? Will our services still run right? And do we still have customers? That kind of thing, right?
No, absolutely.
You do your best, but.
No.
And I think too, that's a great point, Byron. I think because this was such a phenomenon, it was on TV, right? It suited all the elements of something like this being from a movie in some sort. global impact. People are tied to their TVs. It was this kind of feeling of like, wow, you're seeing
apocalypse.
You've seen people stranded in airports, healthcare workers. It just tied into this phenomenon of some of the things that we see from a very fictional standpoint, right? But it really tied into that, the imagery of what we see specifically in IT, right?
Yeah,
kind of like, wow,
absolutely.
yeah, kind of interesting.
Well, it also gave some insight, right, into our world to a layman, right? Because I think sometimes people think that, technology and IT, we're just, pushing buttons and, having fun back here. And we do have fun, but it's serious work, right? I would like to thank all of you for being on the show and taking the time to talk about this because, I have to thank Chris for even the idea because when he and I talked and we were both like, oh, we need to do an episode on this. And I wanted to bring, a group of people to get some different perspectives. So really appreciate all of you being on the show. I'm going to let each of you tell our listeners where they can find you, whether it's on LinkedIn or if you have a website. Byron, I'll start with you. Thank you for joining, and you can tell our listeners where to find you.
So, Zoix, or Zone 1 Internet Exchange, you can find us on the internet at www.zoix, that's ZOIX.com. And when I founded the company, I purposely made our domain name short and sweet so that you don't have to type as much. So,
all right,
there you go.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes, I have a presence on LinkedIn as well. Organization that I work for is VC3. But yes, I have tremendous counterparts on LinkedIn from a tech perspective. Been in the industry for about 15 years. So welcome to more intelligent conversations with like-minded individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. And Keith?
Yeah, you can find me at Real Keith on LinkedIn and in the Minneapolis cyber security community.
And I will be linking everyone's companies and LinkedIn bios on the show notes. And I just wanted to remind everyone that if you want to get into further discussions about this, feel free to contact Minerva at Let's Talk at minervaconsultinginc.com, or you can go to our website at minervaconsultinginc.com. And I have a few reminders for our listeners. Number one is we know what year we're in, so please make sure you're registered to vote if you haven't. And secondly, 3 quick next steps. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a new episode. Leave a rating and add a comment. I love reading the comments, so please leave those. And once again, wanted to thank our guests. Gentlemen, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be on the show and looking forward to having you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sonal.